Hello and welcome to a very special second part of Deceptive Reality. My name is Nick, and with me is the seal-eyed bird. And none of you are going to know what that means yet.
Man, I don't even want you to give the description of this one, Nick. We'll just we'll let them figure this out.
No,
in the podcast.
I'm going to let everyone figure it out. Yep. Some of you will think this is positive. Some of you will think this is negative. I'm letting you make your own decisions.
This is valid. Let me tell y'all, obviously, we told you in the very beginning of part one that this was going to be a two-parter. I can honestly say without a shadow of a doubt, what you heard up into part one, that's the most normal that it's going to be the entire time.
And he ain't kidding. I'm telling you.
I'm not kidding.
It is a wild ride.
It's a very wild ride all the way to the very end. But listen, I understand. It's been an entire week. You forget some stuff. Occasionally I forget some stuff. Check this out.
On that particular Friday, as Art answered calls from his many listeners, he was unaware that the night ahead would etch itself into the annals of radio history. Amidst his routine, a fax arrived, catching Art's attention. The message, sent by a man named Mel Waters, read, "Dear Art, I'm writing to you to see if I can get some help from you or your vast listening audience." As Art continued to peruse the fax, he found himself utterly engrossed in the tale Mel was sharing. The mysterious story outlined within the message was compelling enough that Mel hoped Art might read a portion of it on air.
Here he is from, I don't know where he is right now, Mel Waters.
He was there for a good 30, 40 years before we moved in. I got this thinking one day, how come this hole is not filling up?
Sure.
Let's put aside all these supernatural or sci-fi things that people might call in about. The overlap between conspiracy theorist and potential domestic terrorist is really, really close.
Right.
So that is was probably a good place to keep a pulse on that community too, right? Keep your finger on the pulse of that community.
Correct. It was definitely interesting to see, is how I'd put it. Now,
a nearby resident once claimed that several years prior, one of his hunting dogs had died. Rather than bury the animal, the man decided to dispose of the body by dropping it into the hole. Several weeks later, while out hunting, the man claimed to have seen his dog alive and wandering about. This wasn't just any dog. It was his dog, identical in every detail, right down to the collar and tag it had worn. The man called out to his dog, but it seemingly ignored him, eventually running off into the distance. This wasn't an isolated incident either. Another neighbor admitted to disposing of dead cows in the hole, though there were no reports of the cattle reappearing. He explained that he had owned this land for a few years, and on it, there existed a hole measuring 9 feet and 9 inches across. Surrounding the hole was a 3-foot-high retaining wall, giving it the appearance of a well, though it was anything but. This wall extended down about 15 feet before transitioning into dirt and soil, and eventually rock further down. Using powerful halogen lights, Mel could see these layers, but even these lights failed to illuminate the bottom. This hole seemed to have been a fixture on the property for an indeterminate length of time. Mel wasn't alarmed when he discovered his neighbors were using the hole as a dumping ground, driving up in the evenings to dispose of their rubbish. Adopting the local tradition, he too began discarding anything he no longer needed into the hole. Initially concerned about potential environmental impact, Mel conducted regular water tests, which always came back pristine. It seemed whatever lay at the bottom was solid and impermeable. However, Mel soon noticed something weird. No matter how much rubbish was thrown in, the hole never filled up. More intriguingly, there was never any sound from the objects hitting the bottom. No echo when he shouted into it. No splash when rubbish was dropped. Not even when he hurled an entire fridge and a television.
Which we've not really.
Yeah, I'm curious about that after all this time.
Yeah, it's very peculiar is what we'll say.
All right. Lay it on me.
Let's see what happens.
Mel went on to describe how officials in Australia had shown significant interest in his research into alternative medicines, especially the plants he had grown on the land surrounding the hole. In an extraordinary tale, Mel recounted how these plants had been given to 3 men who were in hospice care, all suffering from HIV. Miraculously, months later, all 3 men experienced a complete recovery. Art expressed surprise that Mel would return to the U.S., but Mel explained that he missed his family and wanted to come back, which he did in late 1999, a decision he soon regretted. The ownership of the land turned out to be more complicated than Mel had presented. The property actually belonged to his now ex-wife. Since leasing out the land, Mel had been paying her $25,000 a month as part of their amicable divorce settlement. However, upon his return to America, he was quickly served with legal papers alleging that he had breached the lease terms. The documents claimed that fuel tanks, a septic system, and paved roads had been added to the property during his absence. Large-scale changes he was not permitted to make. As a result, his lease was revoked, and the government payments ceased, possibly being redirected to his ex-wife instead. However, Mel was unable to contact her to confirm this, as she had seemingly vanished without a trace. When Mel checked his accounts, he discovered that all the money he had received over the past several years had disappeared. His institutions in Australia were abruptly shut down, and all staff were let go. Mel found himself back in the U.S., stripped of his land and without a penny to his name, his dreams and hard work unraveling before him.
Oh, that took a downward spiral I wasn't expecting.
Welcome to the government.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, that was a pretty rough blow.
You might have to, you might have to explain the leasing situation to me. Like, he owned the land.
Nope.
No, he didn't own the land, so he was subletting it.
So the way that it was
government.
explained, well, he didn't go too deep into it, but I believe what was happening was
Right.
he had told everyone that he owned the land. He was married. My assumption is in the
Right.
divorce decree, she still had ownership. So it was her land. He gets this contract from the government with $250,000. And he goes, hey, babe, gonna go rescue some wombats in Australia with, I found a little money sitting around. Not a big deal. I got this calling for the wombat. You know me. Hey, I tell you what, I love you. Going to give you $25,000 a month. And she goes, oh, $25,000 every month?
Wow.
Listen, babe, I love you. I love you. The wombats, I love them more, He goes to Australia, saves him a few wombats. Life is going good. He comes back, and then they're able to serve him with papers that is legal.
Right.
They can't take away your stuff unless they've officially gave you your papers. Well, now he's back on U.S. soil because he missed his family, and they're able to serve him with those papers. Now?
Yeah. Well, it seems like he didn't own it anyway, so he kind of frauded the system here.
Kind of. That's kind of the indication I got. That at least that's the way I look at it. He didn't go too deep into it. And again, why would you if you're the one doing it? You're like, I don't know what happened there. It's kind of crazy story. Well, I'm darned. So yeah, that's kind of what I assume happened is based on what he said. They say, hey, we're going to give you $250,000 for your land. He goes, oh, cool. He calls his wife, then ex-wife, and he goes, hey, babe, $25,000 a month. Listen, I'm going to give you. He's like, man, I'm getting away with this thing with a smooth $225,000 a month.
Right. So he, okay. Try this again, because I'm not sure I completely understand unless she's a moron. But I'm assuming she's not.
Oh, I'm sure not.
So she owned the land.
They was married. So my assumption is they both probably had some ownership in the land, but she was probably on the deed. So prime example, he may have been like a partial on the deed, but she was probably the primary.
Right. Yeah. Or maybe he wasn't on the deed at all. It depends on what he came in with. And
my guess is to be able to do something, to do something, he had to have been on the deed in some regard, because the government wouldn't have been like, yeah, it's cool, well, you're not on the deed, but we'll give you some money. They wouldn't do that.
Yeah. But she owned it. She wasn't leasing it, right?
No, he was.
So after the divorce, he must have said that he was leasing the land from her for $25,000 a month or however.
I think he was just shysty. I think he was probably like, hey, in the divorce decree, because with the divorce decree, typically you can. So it's a gray area, and I've dealt with finance for a long time. And what I tell customers is, because what happens is husband and wife comes in and gets a loan. Here in the good old United States of America, you have certain provisions put in place if you're married. So let's use, for example, if you're a wife and you got 2 kids and you and your husband's name is on the house, the wife might be like, you know what? My kids go to school here. I think I should have the house. So in the divorce decree, even if the house is in his name, the court says she is going to do something, whether it's a monetary value or whatever it may be, but she has to still live in the house with the kids.
Right.
Now, my guess is he has this little, whatever he called it, laboratory in the woods or whatever. They're getting divorced, and he's probably like, babe, you have no use for this land. Like, there's nothing really here, but I've got this stuff up on the hill. I care about this. What if I could give you some money? And then you let me keep the land that's partially in both of our names, but primarily in yours. Right. And you let me keep, because I don't want to move all my stuff from up there. Now, my guess is this was probably in effect before the government stepped in. Government comes in and says, we're going to give you.
So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Government's like, we're going to give you $250,000. He goes back to the wife and he goes, you know what? I'm going to Australia. Things are kind of crazy. I came into a little bit of money, just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and up the amount. Just don't ask any questions. $25,000 a month. And she's like, where are you getting $25,000 from? It's not important. Hey, do you want it or no? Well, yeah, I wanted $25,000. Because who would think someone would get more than $25,000 a month? This was the 90s.
Right. I mean, that's a wild amount.
That's a wild amount. So for her, she's probably like, heck yeah, $25,000 a month.
Yeah. Well, who would say no to that?
Right.
So now was it the lease with her that said that he couldn't put in roads and improvements or whatever?
That's my understanding. So she was like, hey, now you can have this land, but you cannot do X, Y, and Z. It's got to stay the way it is.
Now, while he was subleasing it to the government, obviously they put in roads
because they got to have it
and that kind of stuff.
They got to move stuff around up there.
She don't even know about that. So she serves him papers.
Correct. Now you're picking up
and
what they're laying down.
That means, now I'm getting it straight.
Yeah.
So then he comes back and all of a sudden he gets these papers. The government goes directly to her.
Yeah, because they say, hey, this is no longer his deal. You screwed up. You did.
Yeah.
In these papers, it looks like he did exactly what he said he would not do. But it wasn't him. It was the government that did it.
Yeah. Now the government's kind of got him because they're like, well, you had an agreement with us that you really didn't have any.
Right.
Like you didn't really have a right to do because we have to do this stuff.
Right.
And you didn't tell us we couldn't.
And on top of that, now they go to her. Who knows what deal they worked out with her? Maybe they go to her and they go, well, what's he paying you? $25,000? We'll give you $50,000.
Yeah. Yeah. They're saving a ton of money.
They're saving a ton of money.
And now it's actually more legal than it was before.
Correct. And on top of it, the money they paid him, they took it back because he didn't have the agreements that even began with all that. And he came back to the States when he said he wouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So just that money they took back from him will probably pay her for a decade.
Oh, probably. Easily.
Even at $50,000.
Even at $50,000.
So he was not very bright in this.
He should have
He could
stuck
have
with
flew
his
his
wombat.
family over.
Yeah. He should have stuck
Yeah.
with his little wombats. It's fine. Just stick with some wombats, man.
He had enough money. He could have flew his family to visit him in Australia. They probably would have loved that.
$250,000. He could have done a whole bunch.
Yeah.
He was like a local celebrity.
Yeah, and that was monthly, right?
Yeah, every month.
He messed up.
He was picking up
He
$3
messed up.
smooth $1 million a month, tax free.
Yeah,
This is government
it's
money.
crazy.
Tax
Yeah.
free, baby.
Yeah. You know what he should have done? Hindsight being 2020. Saved up a little bit of that money and bought that land from his wife,
Oh, yeah,
ex-wife,
correct.
and then this would have solved the whole situation.
I think that his thought process was that probably would have raised too many red flags.
Yeah, I can see how that would be, but I mean, like, again, hindsight 2020 doesn't matter because now you got nothing.
Here's what I think
So
happened,
it would have been good to try.
and I'm speculating. He tells the wife, hey, we got this arrangement. I'm going to start paying you $25,000 a month.
Mm.
She goes, $25,000? Okay. He starts paying her every single month, $25,000. She goes, where the heck is he getting this $25,000 from? Is he doing
Right.
something illegal on my land? Because how did she know all that stuff was there? So she goes to the land to see what's going on with my land. She gets there and she goes, the heck is all this stuff? There's a military guy at the front. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? This is my land. What do you
Well,
mean
it's
this is
my
your
land. Yeah.
And then that's probably how this entire thing started.
Yeah. And thus began the downfall of the House of Mel and his wombats.
Yes. The wombat's down,
I
boys.
assume all his wombats are unprotected now.
They are protected.
They just open the door and they're like, okay, all you wombats, get out.
You're done. You're done in this town.
Done, wombats. Back to endangered.
You're an endangered species yet
Like-
again.
Yeah, but that was such a house of cards that, man, I didn't even realize was built into that.
Oh, yeah.
That's wild.
You know, something that we
Like-
did not cover that was also covered in that episode, the special ingredients from the land that he had cured multiple people of HIV.
I had meant to bring that part up because I don't know if you've heard this, but they've even now, just now, got a vaccination that if you take it, what was it, every month, you can't catch HIV at all.
Yes, I did see that. They're
I wonder
using
if that's
the
related to his work.
yeah, they've created it based on the mRNA.
Yeah, they were saying that that's why it was originally supposed to be used for,
Yeah,
that kind of thing. But it can deliver any kind of thing.
correct. Because it's the way it
on
works
an
with the cell.
Yeah, in an unrelated side note, medical advancements, they've been able to reverse aging in mice now.
I did see that also.
Man, I can't wait till we're living forever.
I don't know that I want to live forever.
This is where you should play a clip of Who Wants to Live
Yeah,
Forever.
that would be genius.
I do. It's me. It's me. I'm that guy.
I don't know.
I got a lot of stuff to get done, Bert.
I feel
A lot of
like
stuff to get done.
we live long enough to get a grasp of life, but not so much that we hate it.
I think I could do with a lot more and still be pretty happy. I'm easy to please.
I don't know. I've thought about this a lot.
Yeah. At some point, if you're the only one doing it,
Yeah.
I think it would suck.
Yep.
But if everyone you cared about was doing it, I think it would be just fine.
The problem is that life doesn't work that way. Life finds a
Not
way
yet.
and death finds a way. That's how life works.
For now, we're gonna slay that demon.
Well, prime
Let's
example.
Slay it.
We die probably the most from freak accidents than, well, not the most, but we definitely die from a significant amount of differences in just random oddities, slipping and falling in the shower, car accidents,
Right.
wild animals. There's so many. We're so easy. We're so frail, but we don't understand how frail we really are. So though medical technology will advance, eventually, if you're really careful and you go through life in a bubble, and I don't think anyone should want to live life like they're in a bubble. I think that you got to be courageous and you got to explore and you got to try to, but that opens up risks. But if, let's just say you're in your own little bubble and you're trying to be protective, and then your best friend dies. You could be 100 years old and your best friend just died. You've known him there your entire life, and then your mom dies, and then your dad dies, and then your spouse dies, and then, good Lord forbid, when your kids die, and now the only one alive is you because you're protecting yourself in this bubble. Is that really a life that you want to live?
Well, see, that was my stipulation. If you're the only one doing it, I don't think it would be very good. You'd have to make them immortal too, right?
Correct. It's like you and I, we talked about, actually, when we took this little break, because we took a break in the podcast, split it up since it's a two-parter. When it comes to content creation right now, I care less about what the story is and more about how to humanize the story.
Right.
You know, no matter what the story is, I want someone to care about the story and care about the people that's associated with the story. The story doesn't really matter to me. It's how did I get it there? It's like that mRNA vaccination that they're curing things. I could care less about curing it and more so about how do I get it woven into the bloodstream? How do I get you to care about whatever it is? I think in life, it's the same thing. And by that, what I mean is, I want to care about my story too, but there comes a point in time where if everything around me is gone and the only stories I have are the past that I can't relive with anyone, I kind of want to see what's on the other side. I want to know what's not like this life. I know this entire life, but I don't know what's on the other side.
Right.
If I'm right, that's exciting. If I'm wrong, who knows? We could be in a simulation and it might be better the second time around. Who knows?
It could be. Maybe it just restarts. We don't know, but I feel like I'm not even close to experiencing all life has to offer.
Oh, surely not. No.
And I mean, playing devil's advocate, you can make new stories with new people. Like, I don't personally want that, but I mean, people do it all the time.
I think it sounds good, and I think a lot of people do it, but I think there's a lot of people that don't. Like a prime example.
Yeah.
My grandmother passed away when I was relatively young. I think about her every day. And that memory, though it fades, it never goes away. You know, I'm not going to get emotional on this thing. But you still think about that kind of thing every single day. And my grandfather, when he passed away, when my uncle passed away, those thoughts are constantly, you know, I'll never forget, not going to get emotional on this thing. My parents,
you don't have to do this if you don't want to.
It's okay.
Just so you know.
It's okay. My parents, for Christmas, they created this like a little photo collage of everyone who's passed away in my family. People that I loved, like my grandma, my grandpa, my uncle. And when I looked at that, it took me right back to that moment, those moments when they were all alive. And I was a basket case for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But we think about it, you know, you can put new narratives and new people in your story, but that old story never goes away. And you live with that.
Yeah, they're never replaced.
They're never replaced. But you still live with that.
Actually, you bring up a good point. That eventually you'd build up so many, like you would bring in new people.
Yeah.
And then you'd lose them too.
Right.
And you'd build up so many tough memories that maybe it would be hard to live on a daily basis.
Correct. That's
It's
the
sort
hard
of like
part.
Interview with the Vampire, what that series is about.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit.
It kind of is. I mean, I've not watched it, but I understand the premise and kind of what was around it. But, you know, we don't think about that. Like, people's always like, man, I want to live forever and do this and that. And I'm like, you really don't. Like, you really don't. Like, It sounds good.
Yeah.
It sounds good on the surface, but
I don't know. I'd want to do it, but I'd want to have an escape plan too.
for sure. For sure. It goes back to all those people nowadays. I'm not going to go too deep because I don't want to get demonetized, but they have those specialized pods where you can explore the other side if you decide to do it. And it's like, those people just didn't randomly choose it. They had so much hurt that they're like,
yeah,
I want to do this pod, this, I don't want to endure this anymore. And it's like, what did you go through? But if you're alive let's say you live to be 150, 200 years old,
right.
Think about all the stuff and the way that time flies. I can tell you in 45 years, my life has flown by. So if this is 45 years, you throw another 45 on, it still flew by. And a lot of it I won't remember, but you know what I do remember is those things that stay there. They stay stagnant.
Yeah.
And they never go away. They're just constant static. The problem is I add more people in and more people are no longer here. That static gets louder and louder and louder. And then I'm so scared that I'll be the next one, that I'm protecting myself. And now I don't have a life. I'm just spending my entire life trying not to be like them. And they keep getting knocked off.
Right. That's the only difference that I don't share in common with you of all these things here, is when that happens to people I know, I don't worry about it happening to me, because I look at it as that's the end of my worry.
Yeah.
Like
sure.
I never consider my own end. Yeah. But I know there's this, I don't know if we should go too much further into this. Now I'm going to leave that part out.
Okay.
But anyway, I don't give a poop what happens to me.
Yeah.
I only care about the people around me.
For sure.
Because once I'm done, my I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
If you're right, then I'll be like super happy and can't wait to see people again.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
If you're wrong though, I won't know any different. So
yeah, for sure. And I think that's why I look at everything the way that I look at it. It's like when I look through this narrow scope of what life is, it's like, if I'm wrong, I was just a better person. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because I'll be honest, there's times where I'm like, man, I really want to do X, Y, and Z. And then I think about it, I'm like, I shouldn't do that. Versus if I wasn't the way I was, maybe I would.
Right. Yeah. It's hard to say, because people can provide their own morality too. But I guess the roundabout point that this has all come from is this guy made a medical advancement that I feel like maybe we're seeing the effects of today.
Oh, I don't disagree. I don't disagree at all.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you look at that stuff. Because we're just now having advancements that we've never seen.
Oh yeah. And like, this isn't the end of what the mRNA can do. This is just like a stepping stone. Supposedly this stuff will be able to do so many other things as well. And honestly, I don't know if we would have, like, this may be delivering what he created, the mRNA. Maybe that was the piece that they needed him to work on.
Could
and
be
they're delivering it now.
But it could be where my thought process was. He used these plants from the ground around that hole.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So
that's right.
Why are these plants so special? That's odd. They can't replicate the same thing using different plants in Australia.
Maybe it's related to this darkness that's coming out of the hole. I don't even know what to call that. Like, darkness doesn't seem right.
It doesn't seem right.
Light doesn't seem right.
That definitely doesn't seem right.
I don't even know what to call it. Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting thing to look at, isn't it? It's not easy.
Yeah. It's. I think that's the thing that's stumping me the most. Like, I have no idea what could cause that. Not in the slightest.
Well, it's an abnormality is the best way that we can probably put it, because Again, there's been so many things that's happened around this hole that makes zero sense. But again, it goes back to they dropped a dead dog in there. And now the dead dog's back alive.
I'd be doing a heck of a lot more of that. Like that's like I'd be finding, like I'd be going the roads and I find, a porcupine someone run over in the hole.
Right.
Like anything I could find in the hole.
Right. It would be curious, but then again, how do you know that was the porcupine you threw in?
Oh, that's a good question.
There's a lot to it.
No, I don't know.
Deep.
I don't know. I guess, I guess it would have to be something you're more familiar with then. So
right. Now, this entire story from this phone call, he's going back in time explaining, here's what's happened. Right. I cut this before another major event had happened that he's going to explain on the radio show.
You're so sneaky.
Well, that's what I do.
You're so sneaky. You're kind of being deceptive to my reality.
That is exactly what I'm doing. So just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, check this out.
Mel was helping his nephew move into a new apartment in Olympia. He needed to return a rented truck and then planned to take a bus back to Olympia to assist his nephew with unpacking before his scheduled appearance on Art's show that night. During the bus ride back, a fight erupted between two passengers. The bus was forced to stop at a park and ride, where various transit staff and police boarded to speak with the passengers about the incident. Mel stepped off the bus to talk to the officials, emphasizing his urgent need to return to Olympia. The officials assured Mel they had a transit van that could drive him back if he was willing to answer some questions along the way. Mel agreed and entered the van, but then everything went black. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in an alleyway surrounded by homeless people, with the taste of blood in his mouth. He soon realized he was in San Francisco, and 12 days had passed. His ID, wallet, and keys were missing, along with a belt buckle he had crafted himself. His arm ached, and upon rolling up his sleeve, he found a needle mark with a piece of tape still attached, as if an IV had been placed there. Exploring the source of the blood taste in his mouth, Mel discovered that all his back molars had been removed. Dazed and confused, he managed to contact his nephew, who had been frantically searching for him, as Mel had been missing for nearly 2 weeks.
Holy macaroni. This guy. Oh, I can't help but think they orchestrated this fight on this bus.
It's odd. It's odd. Have you ever watched the movie The Game with Michael Douglas?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, well, someone will appreciate this analogy. It's a great movie. It's my favorite movie of my entire life.
I'll definitely watch it, and I promise you that.
It would be the number one seat. If somebody said you could only watch one movie the rest of your life, what would it be? It would be Michael Douglas's The Game.
Wow.
Without giving too much away, I love movies where you think you understand the concept of what's going on and you determine you don't know anything about what you're talking about. So in the movie The Game, without giving anything away, at the very beginning of the game, Michael Douglas is like this multi-millionaire. He has everything. There's nothing that he could ever want to have. His brother buys him a game for his birthday. To play the game, you have to go to this company, and then they first make sure and evaluate that you can play the game or not. So he goes and he spends an entire day seeing if he can even qualify to play this game, because they want to make sure your heart's good enough, you have enough health, you're intelligent enough to figure out the game. It's like a couple of days later, I think, in the movie, and he gets a phone call and it says he didn't qualify for the game. Well, now the man that has everything is ticked off because he's like, why didn't I qualify for this game? Like, it doesn't, why? So at first he plays it off like, I don't really care, blah, 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 whatever, right? But then a series of events occur, and I'm not going to go into why, but it's very similar to here because you start questioning, well, was this just random or was this something that someone orchestrated to happen?
Yeah, that's what I'm already questioning on this.
Yes, because how is it that he's on this bus? This series of events would occur, and much like in the movie The Game, things are in almost a form of orchestration. Like if you're in a bus and you're not really paying attention, and back then maybe you're napping or something, and you hear something going on, it doesn't take a whole lot to not understand what's going on. Then they stop the bus, and now there's officials going, we need to talk to everyone on this bus. Then they talk to you, and then you're like, dude, I got to get back to Olympia. I'm helping my nephew move. He's supposed to be moving in now. Well, I tell you what, we don't typically do this. We'll take you to Olympia. We actually have a shuttle that's going there anyway if you jump in, but we got to get this report done. We have to. He jumps into the van, bam, he's out.
Yeah, he's out like a light.
But to think that they've been following him and waiting for this opportunity to just pop up, the odds are rare to none.
I would agree, except what are the odds of them just happening to be there when this happened?
That's the thing. I think that they
it was just a random event and they just happened to be there. I do. I also think they created it.
I think they followed the guy around, multiple people, and they said, here's how we do this. We create this event. And again, no one's paying attention. Think about it. When something happens on an airplane or something else, you're catching the tail end of it going, what happened? Explain to me. So they could really do nothing, make it look like something, and all of a sudden it is something. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I'll tell you, sort of a similar circumstance. When I moved back to Nova Scotia, I decided foolishly to take the train.
Yeah.
Instead of taking an airplane. I thought I would like train rides. I hate them.
Wow.
Because if you're going on a long train ride, they stop at every town and they pick up new, fresh people who are maybe only traveling an hour. And if you're traveling like 20, 30 hours, you're getting tired. And every stop, some new person gets on and they want to talk to you because they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you haven't slept in 25 hours, right?
Correct, yeah.
But anyway, that being beside the point, there was a fight in another car on the train. I didn't even know it happened. All I know is suddenly we're going backwards on the train. And the reason is that the fight wasn't discovered until we were into the next province. That's like, I'm sure you know, but provinces are states kind of thing.
Yep.
And they can't call the cops in the province we're in. They have to take the guys back to where it happened. So we start going backwards for like an hour and a half until we get back into the other province so that they can arrest these guys. And then they start taking statements from everyone. I'm 2 cars away. I don't know what's going on.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, if someone had offered me a car ride to Nova Scotia instead of being on that crappy train, I would have been in there before they would have finished their sentence.
And then you would have been knocked out at a homeless shelter in San Francisco, Nick.
And that would be super weird. And also missing my back teeth. I don't like that.
Your back molars are gone now. Makes no sense, Nick.
Yeah. I can't think of what I use them for right at the moment, but I'm sure I wouldn't like it.
I'm sure you would not be happy about it. What a crazy
those are
thing
my
to have
grinding
happen.
teeth.
Like, of all of them, why the back molars?
But that's what I can't figure out.
None of this story makes sense.
Like, yeah, and why San Francisco? Like, how far is that from Olympia? That sounds like it's far.
The only thing because he was gone for 12 days. I don't know if it mentioned that or not. It was 12 days.
Yeah, they should took his teeth on the first day, by the way. It seems like they took him out on the last day.
Do you reckon they knocked him out and then they did whatever they needed to do, and all of a sudden one guy's like, hey, you know what we should do? Take his back molars out. Well, why would we do that? We don't even need his back molars, because then he'll spend the rest of his life going, why'd they take my back molars for?
And that's cruel. That's like super villain kind of stuff.
That's super villain
right?
thinking, Nick.
I could see them doing that though. That's a nasty thing to think about.
See, that's what I'm saying, Nick. This is why I got to be on the good side.
Yeah.
Because I can't have thoughts like that.
Well, I mean, you're thinking it up, but meanwhile, I'm like, remove molars.
This is why we got a podcast, everybody.
Yeah, come up with bad ideas.
Come up with really bad ideas.
The Bad Ideas Podcast. Oh man, we should use that name.
We should use Bad Friends Podcast or Evil Friends Podcast.
Oh, I think that's taken.
Bad Friends Podcast?
Yeah, it's Bobby Lee and Andrew Santino's podcast, Bad Friends.
Oh, is that what they call their podcast?
It is hilarious.
Oh, I didn't know that's what they called it.
I thought you were making a joke. No. That's the real podcast name.
No, I did not know that's what it was called. I always see excerpts of it, but I've never seen their actual podcast. Like I've never seen a full podcast. I used to watch him and
me neither.
And what was her name? Kalila or whatever. Tiger Belly.
Yeah. I've heard of that.
Yeah.
I've also not seen that.
I've seen a couple of episodes of that. Only when it was people I cared about that they had on. Like,
right.
Like they had that huge episode with who's that UFC fighter guy? Brendan Schaub. And they were going back and forth. And then when they was going back and forth, I'm like, I kind of want to watch that whole thing and see what happened there because they were fighting with each other. So, little drama.
Well, what I can say for sure. So the Bad Friends podcast, they really ticked off David Spade.
Oh, they did?
Because Bobby Lee didn't show up on time. They kept him waiting for an hour and a half.
That's right.
Like that.
I did see that.
But I'll tell you one thing. If you ever are a guest on Deceptive Reality, we'll actually call you like 45 times, so we'll not be late.
Correct. 100%.
Like we're repeatedly have you on our show over and over again.
A guest spot for life.
That's right. That's right. You can just ask Joe how many times we've called.
That's facts right there. This episode will come out.
We'll never leave you alone.
This episode will come out before Joe's, but bear in mind, when you see Joe's episode, that thing has been multiple attempts.
Yeah, and we're still not letting him go. We're gonna talk to him again.
Oh man.
Are we the demons?
Sometimes I feel like we might be.
Yeah, I guess.
Oh man. So now he's at a homeless shelter, no back molars, had an IV in his arm, completely confused, was gone
12
for
days,
lost 12 days. He woke up without his ID, without his wallet, without his keys, and
his custom belt buckle.
I didn't talk about that. I deliberately held, because I was like, everyone's going to be like, why is he talking about this custom belt buckle? You will find out. Just put another pin in this one. Put some pins in there.
I'm running out of pins, Bert.
Listen, we'll be covering these pins eventually. We're just putting them in right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, did you know any of this new stuff?
No. I must have missed a ton of stuff.
I can't wait because
when I listen to podcasts, it's always right before bed, and I don't know how much of it I watch, how much of it I make up in my dream and consider it reality.
Yeah.
How much I miss.
Here's the fun part. I'm so excited. The moment that we're in right now, would you say this is a crazy moment? Relatively crazy?
Probably amongst the craziest, yeah.
This is completely normal compared to everything else we're about to go down.
Oh my goodness. I don't know if I can take it. Take it.
This is so good.
You're taking a lot of pleasure in this torment.
I am so excited because this next part, I feel like we've really hit a plateau, right? I feel like we've hit a plateau a little bit. We got this hole. We got all this stuff going on with the hole. We're talking about the hole. Now we got to.
This is hardly about the hole at all anymore.
Now, but listen, it's kind of about the hole, right? Because the government and all that.
Okay.
The government are good people. We do not.
Right.
We don't want Bert to be in a ditch with, as a drug addict or whatever they're going to say.
Yeah. He needs his molars.
But now, Nick, I feel like we're about to go into a new episode of Deceptive Reality because this next part, the best way for me to put this, if someone said, what is this episode about? And I told them about the hole, and then we got to this part of the story, I'd be like, well, now maybe not so much. Now it's about this. Are you ready to take a significant spin in a different direction?
I've already forgotten the hole. Let's do it.
We're going back to the hole. The hole's central.
Oh, we're going back to the hole.
Well, we're living in the hole.
Well, we'll
we
see.
just sidetracked so we can understand what happened to our buddy Mel. But the hole's the central story.
I feel like he put a lid on the hole and we're just like, well, we're not talking about the hole anymore.
Oh no, we're about to talk about the hole.
Once Mel returned to safety, he contacted Art and rearranged his appearance on the show. Mel didn't believe the incident had anything to do with his upcoming appearance on Coast to Coast, but Art was convinced it was a warning to silence him. Mel, now 68 years old, expressed that he had lost everything and felt he had nothing left to fear. However, he admitted he didn't dare try to access his land again. Despite everything, he still sought answers and hoped to reconnect with people he had met while researching the hole in Washington. He believed some individuals possessed rocks or other items from the property that could potentially be tested. His research with the plants had led him to believe there was something powerful in the ground around the hole. Mel then shared a wild story involving a gun he had found while digging on the land. It appeared to be an old German pistol. At one point, he had used the gun as a deposit for an apartment, giving it to the landlord. Later, Mel spoke with the landlord's children, who revealed strange occurrences involving the gun. The gun, though functional and capable of firing bullets, didn't make a sound. Additionally, when placed next to a radio, the signal would distort and change, with the station suddenly playing oldies. Moving the gun around caused the radio to cycle through different stations, all broadcasting old shows, including commentary from a 1960s baseball game. The landlord became obsessed with the gun, keeping it close at all times, until one day, he simply vanished. His children had no idea what happened to him and have never found him. Mel made another strange claim. He suggested that his hole might somehow be connected to the mass unalivings that happened with the Heaven's Gate cult, which occurred shortly after his previous appearances on Art's show. He didn't elaborate further on this connection, leaving the audience with yet another tantalizing mystery. And with that, Art Bell's third call with Mel Waters came to an end. Once again, Mel would vanish, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and eerie coincidences.
Okay. You know where I thought that the gun thing was going?
Where?
I thought that, well, number one, the gun doesn't make any sound.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty wild.
For sure.
But disregarding that, when you bring it close to radios, it plays old stations.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking because you said it was like an old German gun from...
Old German gun. Yep.
Yeah. When I think of old German gun, I always think of like World War II or whatever.
Sure.
But it could have easily been made in the 60s.
Could be.
I was thinking, wouldn't it be wild? Because you mentioned earlier that some people thought it was like some portal in time, and it's got some kind of time radiation. That's something I just made up right now.
Mm-hmm.
Time radiation, that when it's brought close to a radio, the time radiation, I keep saying this over and over again, the time radiation
plays
radio shows from the time that the gun went into the hole initially.
Yeah, that's a
before
good
it
thought
came back
process.
out, maybe. Have others had other theories about this that you know of?
I could not find anyone that talked about theories, but I have my own.
What's your own? Or can you tell me that?
Here's what I think is happening.
Okay.
And we've covered this before on our podcast. And the only reason that I have this theory is based on the fact that we've kind of talked about something earlier in this episode that I believe we put a pin in. So with this
Got a lot of
gun,
pins.
and there's going to be other things that's coming up. We got a few pins we're going to be knocking off the old pegboard here, here in a little bit. What happened to the dog when they threw the dead dog in the hole?
Come back later.
Came back alive, but it didn't know the owner, right?
Right.
What if it didn't come back? What if it didn't come back from a different time when it was alive, but it came from a different dimension?
Maybe where it never met the owner.
Right.
Maybe the hole goes both ways.
Right.
So when something goes in, maybe there's a possibility that the equivalent from another place could come back.
I think of a story of a man, the man from, are you going to be able to finish it?
Torrid.
Bingo. He came with a special passport that clearly existed. He goes into a room and then all of a sudden he disappears. What if there's a portal that causes a rift between multiple dimensions, which we've proven does exist scientifically?
Yeah. We've talked about that in a number of episodes that were kind of linked together.
Yes. Now think about it. It's a hole that never makes a sound and we never hit the bottom. But what if it's an interdimensional hole, which would explain this dark light coming out of it, much like a black hole?
Right.
What if that's dimensional? Because we don't even understand truly what a black hole is.
No, really. We have a lot of theories about it.
We always assumed that everything gets sucked into a black hole, but just recently, within the last 6 months, we found out that it also shoots stars out.
Which is wild, too, because we never thought that could possibly happen.
Never thought that happened due to a gravity.
Yeah.
We finally started seeing light coming out of the hole. And we go,
like we thought it was annihilating everything.
Correct. But now we've proven that that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
So much like that black hole, now we have this black light coming out of this hole that's on Earth.
Right.
You throw a dead animal in, a live one comes. What if we're throwing something into that dimension and then out the other side is coming something else? What if they've thrown so many things in that occasionally things from another dimension lands on our side, and now all of a sudden they're digging up this gun, but because it's not from our dimensional plane, that's why you can't hear it fire. It's not from our dimension.
Man, that's wild. That's a wild theory. Can you relate that to the radio station thing as well?
I can, because it's not from our dimension. I believe there's an interference or almost like a rift, because our dimension understands, much like you get a splinter in your skin, it doesn't want to stay there.
Right. Yeah.
So it works its way out. Since this doesn't belong in our dimension, who's to say that you move it near something that has RF, right? Radio is just a radio frequency, that it doesn't directly mess, and maybe we're pulling that dimension in. They're saying that we're listening to broadcasts from the past. What if we're not? We're listening to the broadcast that's happening now in a different dimensional plane.
Right. And for homework for people who may not have seen it, if we go back to the episode, what was the one where we talked about the one that was related to Stranger Things?
Oh, the Montauk.
Yeah, the Montauk Project, radio signals were disrupting things in our reality and beyond in that one, and that's what led him to discover that.
Correct. That's why I believe it's interdimensional.
You know what? I think you've got me on board with this, and I can even add on to this a little.
Oh, I like that.
Let's say there's a portal down somewhere deep inside there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it would be more reasonable to say that there's a portal down in there than to say that the hole has no bottom.
That's true.
So if you're lowering a pound weight down in there, you hit the portal, it's going to go into the portal and it will feel just like you're feeding it.
Right.
And then because the bottom of the portal by necessity would be pointing up in the other dimension,
right,
because it's got to go up to another hole there, the lead would just keep spooling at the bottom.
Correct.
As the gravity changes.
You're going the same
direction. So you think
direction.
It's going on and on forever. It's just spooling.
You are dead on. That's exactly.
Wow.
And think about it. That's what happened in Stranger Things. They both had a rope on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both sides was up.
And the gravity just reversed.
Right.
When you go through.
Correct.
Yeah. Man, Stranger Things got a lot of things right, I feel.
That's true. Now, what I did find interesting was that the landlord disappeared. The gun, and he just disappeared one day.
Yeah. There seems to be a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And sometimes you come back, but sometimes you don't.
And it makes me wonder if it's one of two things. One,
he went to the other side.
That's one theory. That was going to be my number 2 theory.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. I'll let you do it.
But my number 1 theory is he took it somewhere and he goes, check this out. Like he took it to a gun range. Is this like a silenced pistol? Like this pistol looks old. Have you ever seen one that doesn't make sound? They go, what are you talking about? Then they call someone. You ever heard
even
of this?
Silenced ones make a sound.
Correct. A very loud sound. It doesn't drop it, but maybe 30 decibels. It doesn't really change it a significant amount. That's why when people goes, man, I got a silencer so no one can hear me inside of a home. That's in the movies. Okay. If you have a silencer, you still hear it. It's just not as loud. It's more muffled.
Yeah.
But
it's not that little sound.
No. If you're standing beside someone in a shooting range and they use a silencer, you still jump because you're like, whoa, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that happened. That was a different sound. Like, it's not like it didn't exist. You know,
I feel like they more often use it so people can't tell the distance as well.
Yeah, it's muffled.
Like maybe you might not know where it's coming from.
Yeah, you still know the direction, but you don't know the depth or how far, for sure. There's definitely a difference. Like a lot
and it's definitely reducing the attenuation range. So
for sure, it's no differently than it would be like putting a pillow, shooting through a pillow. It still muffles the sound. It's not as loud. It just muffles the sound. It's no different. It's the same concept.
Right.
The difference is you got a pillow attached to the end of your gun, basically.
Right.
But I did wonder
it's weird to carry around a pillow all the time.
Oh, for sure. When you figure they start putting this gun in a database, it doesn't pop up. And all of a sudden, whose attention does that get? The government. Now this guy disappears.
Yeah.
Option 2, the guy's messing with the gun. Maybe he shoots it and it pulls him into that dimensional plane. Now you got a guy in the upside down going, the heck am I at? And he's in the year 1960.
And you know what they're saying to that guy? You know what they're saying to that guy in the upside down? Let's just call it the upside down. They're saying to him, where did you get this passport from? This isn't from anywhere here.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. See how all these things tie together?
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's a crazy story.
People watch The Simpsons to get the future. I'm going to watch Stranger Things to understand what's going on.
That's probably a good idea. It's probably a real good idea. Now,
yeah, I would say so.
On top of that, this is the last phone call, and then he disappears again. Mel does.
Oh, what kind of length of time is this, or is that something I gotta wait for?
Here's the thing. He disappeared for a while. It didn't exactly, I couldn't find the exact date of this phone call. I found the phone call in, but it did not have dates. It had a newer date that I'm pretty sure is incorrect.
Right.
My guess is I could probably go through the Art Bell database and find it, but there's so many episodes I didn't want to try to go through all of them.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yes.
Pretend I didn't ask that.
I can tell you.
We'll say it was a while.
I can tell you many years went by. We're talking years.
Right.
Whether it was 3 years, 7 years, it was years. And all of a sudden, we get another contact. Let's check that out real quick, Nick.
During the subsequent years, Mel took to hitchhiking with truckers across the country. Late one night, as luck would have it, he was in a truck cab when he heard his own voice on the radio. Art Bell was replaying his now famous original call with Mel. Deciding it was time for an update, Mel contacted his old friend Art. Art began the call by asking Mel to swear on a Bible that he wasn't making all of this up, which Mel did. The pair then recapped the entire story, with Mel's points matching up to his previous claims. However, Mel added a few additional details. This is where he explained what happened to all his money after Art pressed him on it. Mel also continued to talk about his missing belt buckle from the strange blackout incident in San Francisco, a fact that perplexed Art. Mel explained why it bothered him so much. Much like the gun, Mel had discovered something unusual while digging on his land one day. A red Chinese money envelope containing 10 dimes. For a time, Mel created his own belt buckles, which he sold at the local farmer's market, each buckle containing one of these dimes. He kept one for himself, but sold the others, and it was his own buckle that was stolen from him that day. Recently, Mel bumped into one of the men he had sold those buckles to. Their conversation led to an odd discovery about the dimes. The coins featured an image of Franklin Roosevelt, which initially seemed normal. However, upon closer inspection, they realized the coins were dated 1943, 2 years before Roosevelt's death and 3 years before those dimes would have gone into circulation. It seemed like a strange misprint at first. The man took the coin to a dealer, who showed a great deal of interest in purchasing it. However, the man declined, thinking he had something potentially valuable. The next day, he received a knock on his door from 2 people claiming to be from the Treasury. They confiscated the dime, leading one caller on Art's show to suggest that the hole might be a portal to alternative dimensions, and these coins could be from a reality where Roosevelt died earlier.
I think it's definitely that.
It definitely has that
could it
feel
not
to
be?
it. Definitely has that feel to it.
Yeah.
The only difference in my initial thought process is what they said with this interdimensional plane is what I'll call it. Is they said that it was a plane of the same time frame. So what they're saying is it's almost like people's going back into the past or whatever. I don't think that's the case at all. What I believe is happening is, because if you think about it, we're getting really sciencey here, but sorry, folks. There's a theory that goes around that much like we as humans understand things in a 3-dimensional plane, it's thought that that's only because of the dimension that we're in. Some dimensions, there is no time frame in time either. So though it might be 2024 here in our dimension, there might be a dimension beside us that's 1964 or 1965 or 1978.
Right.
So it's not that you're going back in time. It's that there's no time plane.
Right. And I kind of agree with most of science that you simply can't go back in time.
Not in your dimension.
What's happened is happened.
Right.
Not in your dimension. But if you're going to a different time frame in another dimension, you're not going back in time.
Correct. You're just hitting where their trains
progressed there yet.
Correct.
Right. Exactly. That's a good way of putting it.
Correct.
You're just hitting where their train's at. You're not hitting the train where it was an hour ago. you're hitting it where it's at.
Exactly. Because
Right.
science doesn't really
And-
talk about this that I've ever found. They talk about time and
Right.
dimensions separately, and I think they're one and the same. I believe that
Right.
every dimension beside us is not 2024. I believe there's 2024, maybe 1850 over here.
Right.
You know, we don't know. So when we do talk about time travel and we say, well, we can't go back in time, we can, just not in this dimension. And I think if we try to flex in that dimensional plane, I believe we're not going back in time. We're going unilaterally to the side. That happens to not
to where they've progressed to.
correct. Now the problem is what's in their dimensional plane that's the same and what's in their dimensional plane that's different.
There could be infinite of these.
Correct.
And there could be a plane where the only thing that's different is there's a different stamp in Sweden in the year 1954. And we could visit this plane and think we're in the past because everything is identical to our past.
Correct.
But we just don't see the difference.
We
or
just can't see it.
Or we could enter a plane that's so different that we don't recognize it as the past. We don't even recognize it as our planet, perhaps.
Correct.
Or we enter a plane that's so far ahead of us and we
Correct.
think it's our own future, but it's not.
Correct. How trippy
And I guess
is
that would
that?
explain why psychics can't win the lottery.
That's true. That's true. I think it's a fun thing to think about, though.
Oh, yeah.
He
I
finds.
love when we have these
Oh
episodes.
yeah, this is the most fun I have. Think about it. He has all these dimes that he finds in a, what did he call this thing?
Red Chinese envelope.
Yes. So he finds
Yeah,
these
they give them
dimes.
away at New Year's.
Yes. Now, what I found very odd about this, why does he find it in this envelope and there's only 10? And it's coming from a dimensional plane, a different dimensional plane, is because their world is not like our world. It's significantly different. Similar, but significantly different in a lot of different ways. Which would also explain that dog. The dog went on the other dimensional plane. It's over here. It's like, what is going on? But it's a dog.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I guess I'm here now.
I guess I'm just doing this, but I don't recognize that guy who's calling to me.
Exactly.
So I'm
Who
not
is
going
that
near him.
weirdo? Yeah.
Yeah. Like he seems obsessed with me.
Correct. It could be that dog, just a different dimensional plane version of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I do find it odd as well. I don't think the treasury confiscates misprints or weird versions of their money. Like, does that happen? Is that a thing that happens in America? Or
I know they try to buy them sometimes because they don't want it in circulation.
And they'll do that here too.
Yeah. To confiscate.
Right. Normally it becomes very valuable collector's things.
I don't know that we covered it in this segment. I think I covered it somewhere. Let me look in my narration here. Because I know something that we've not covered yet.
Yeah. The only thing I can think of is that this would not so much be a misprint, but it might look like counterfeit money.
Now
And that we do confiscate here.
Yeah, now you're on it. That's technically what it is. I can't remember if we cover that or not. I think we do, but it might be a couple of It might be a couple of segments from now. But we do cover that at some point somewhere. We cover that.
Okay.
But yeah.
That makes sense then.
It's very interesting to think about this extra dimensional plane.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love when we talk about the extra dimensional stuff. Because I think it's so plausible and I think a lot of scientific theories support it.
Yes. Correct.
So
So
fascinating.
So now we're on a different podcast, different episode. It feels
That's
like,
right.
because it's a little different,
In another dimension, maybe.
Yep.
Maybe this is the episode that we've crossed over, and we're in a reality where we did this episode instead of the whole.
Exactly. In this episode, in this other dimension, can you freaking hit the doggone subscribe button? Golly.
If you didn't in the first dimension, you better do it now.
Exactly. Now, this next section, we kind of stay on the conversation a little bit, but we add some information that's it's going to take us in a very different direction very soon.
My brain's gonna pop if we had too many more things.
Oh, when we get to the next to the last thing. Let's put it this way. It's almost like we have multiple episodes at least 2 more times before this podcast is over.
Oh my goodness. Well, at least I can remove 2 pins that we just covered. So
Exactly. Check out this part, Nick. Let me know what you think of this.
Mel continued by discussing his belief that the military still controlled the hole and the surrounding land. He pointed out that if you looked at Terra server satellite imagery, a precursor to Google Earth, the area where his land would be was blocked off with large white squares. Art confirmed this fact. Art then mentioned that a television crew had recently gone searching for Mel's hole, but couldn't find it. However, in the area where they believed it could be, they found numerous military boot prints and tread marks from large machinery. Mel talked about how more people had come forward, claiming to have seen the black beam in the sky. Through his interactions with truckers, he learned about multiple shipments of massive amounts of fiber optic cables and supplies from a Californian laboratory being delivered to a nearby warehouse. One trucker mentioned that all the people at the warehouse appeared to be from Israel. Mel then got to the main reason he had reconnected with Art. Due to his work with various Native American tribes, a tribe in Nevada reached out to him to discuss his experiences with the hole. In September 2001, he visited them, and they spoke at length about plants. The tribe revealed that they knew of another hole remarkably similar to the one Mel had found in Washington. Interestingly, the plants Mel was researching only grew near this hole. The area was being used by the Basque community as farmland for their sheep. The Native Americans introduced Mel to the Basque community, and after confirming he wasn't from the press, some Basque people took him to see the hole. It was almost identical in size to his hole, but instead of a retaining wall, it had a metal collar around it. The collar was about 2 feet high and extended 2 feet deep into the hole. The walls of the hole also appeared to be metal as they descended into the darkness. The collar had notches, suggesting that a lid might have once been attached, though it was nowhere to be seen. The whole structure looked very modern, yet the Basque people claimed the hole had been there as long as they had been shepherding in the area, which was since the 1800s. At one point, Mel dropped a wrench onto the metal collar. Just like with his own hole, it made no sound. This uncanny similarity between the 2 holes added another layer of mystery to Mel's already extraordinary story, leaving the audience even more captivated and curious about the true nature of these enigmatic pits.
Well, I don't even know where to start with this. Like, who is making these
You know what my favorite part
how
of
could
this?
they have even done it back then? What?
My favorite part of this is we start out and I go, Nick, you know this one? He goes, yeah, but you slept through all the good parts.
I must have, or maybe I only actually heard the first part.
This is like a brand new episode for you, Nick.
It is, and I'm actually under the opinion that I only heard the first episode now,
which
first
is
call.
Very possible. That first call was amazing.
Was the dog part in the first call?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I think I might have only heard the first call. Which is good because I'm really happy to be discovering all this now, but it's just like I don't know what to think about it. Like in the 1800s, someone made this complex metal thing with a lid.
Mhm.
and then just abandoned it. Where's the lid? Were there stones here? Who knows? Like, what the heck is going on with these things?
The heck is going on, Nick? That's a great question.
Like, and how did they get down to build it? How far down does the metal go?
2 foot.
You know, 2 foot.
So it's 2 foot above ground and 2 foot below ground for a
2
total
foot
of 4 foot.
Man, that'd be so dangerous to build that.
Yeah, think about if you fell inside.
Like, I know, right? Well, maybe just go to another dimension. Who knows?
Yeah.
But, see, I've got unknowable questions too, which is the rough part. Have the natives been throwing things in? Have they ever thrown deceased pets or people in there? Like, you know, have they noticed any black whatever coming on top of it? Like,
It's a great question.
I'm sure we don't know any of these. Yeah.
I know some of it, and we're not
Okay.
necessarily it, but I know some things that run in parallel with what you're talking about.
Right. Probably not going to have enough answers to satisfy what I want to know about all of this.
My favorite part is, remember earlier when I said,
Mhm.
you know what, I feel like this is relatively normal sounding with this hole, and you know, would you agree? And you're like, yeah. And I'm like, man, if it changed, how crazy would it be? And you're like, oh, that'd be crazy. And then we get to this crazy part.
I know.
And the best part is, if we stopped right now, this is the most normal part of what we're going to be covering next.
Okay, just answer this. Is there going to be any more holes?
Oh,
Are
you
you
mean
serious?
additional holes?
Yeah.
No. There's only
Okay.
this hole.
I
and
want
Mel's
to
hole.
go. I want to go to one of these holes.
Well, here's what I will tell you. Whereas the
Okay.
first time Mel wasn't able to necessarily test theories and test things that were going on, now since he's working with these Native American individuals, maybe they let him test some things.
That's what I'm hoping.
Well,
Did they?
sometimes your dreams do come true, Nick. Sometimes.
Ah, thank goodness.
I
Because I don't have enough information.
I don't know that you're going to be super excited by some of these. And I feel like I can tell you at the end of one of them, you're just going to sit there and just stare straight ahead going, how do I process this?
I've had a lot of those moments tonight, actually.
Oh, no, this will be significantly worse than that.
Really?
Yeah. Because there was one part where after I got done listening to it, I paused it and I sat there and I go, did I hear that right? And then I rewound.
Oh, boy.
And then I listened again and I go, yeah, I definitely heard that. And then I sat there for maybe 15 minutes just thinking, not typing, just thinking, going, what does that mean? And I'm pretty sure the way your analytical brain works, I'm pretty sure that there has to be a way that even you're going to be like, why would that happen?
Yeah.
And I'm super excited once we get there, and we're close. We're very close to it.
Well, before we move on, do we know what kind of metal this was?
They did not say. They just said metal.
All right. Well, I'll find it when I get there.
Well, here's what we do know.
Yeah.
Based on the phone call, many people had seen this black beam. So it wasn't just one neighbor saying it or two people saying it. Many people at this point have seen it. They've discovered a second hole. There's very many similarities between the two separate holes. The military was definitely at Mel's hole, and they've had tons of fiber optic cable that was going. Now, there was one thing, I don't know if it's in connection. I made a mental note of it, and I put it, I guess I went from mental note to just random note, because I was like, well, that's odd. Where did they get the fiber optic cables from? Do you remember?
What year was this?
2001.
Okay, well, they have fiber optic cables. Where did those come from? I might have missed that part. I know what they're going to do with them, though.
What are they going to do with them?
That's at such a distance, you'd need like a fiber optic cable to get like a video signal back. That's my theory on this, anyway.
It's a good theory. Those optic cables and supplies came from a Californian laboratory being delivered to a nearby warehouse. Where did he end up with when he had his blackout?
Oh, he was in San Francisco, wasn't he?
San Francisco, California. Isn't that a coincidence?
Yeah.
Ain't that a quinky dink?
Interesting. That seems like not a quinky dink at all, in fact.
Yeah. Nick, are you ready to have your mind completely blown?
Oh, is this the one? Is this the one?
Oh, I mean, this one, if you're not scratching your head at the end of it, I really, if this happens the way I think it's going to happen, I'm leaving this pause in, folks. I'm not editing this pause down.
All right, I'm excited. Let's break my brain here.
It's about to be broken.
The metal around the hole was also producing some kind of heat. Not the metal itself. It was cool to the touch, but the air around it seemed to be warm, even at night. The Basque people often camped next to it in the winter to stay warm. They told Mel stories of how animals were too scared to go near it, and that they often saw a black beam emanating from it. Some of the elders viewed the hole as a spiritual site. With the community's permission, Mel was allowed to stay and conduct some experiments. He wanted to measure the temperature inside the hole, a topic frequently discussed by Art's listeners. Mel and his team lowered 2 large bags of ice into the hole, one left on the surface and the other placed in a bucket, and lowered 1,500 feet down. They waited until the ice on the surface had half melted before pulling the bucket back up. What happened next was difficult to explain, even for Mel. The ice from the hole hadn't melted. It looked completely normal but felt different. When Mel touched it, it wasn't cold and didn't melt in his hands. It seemed as though the ice had fundamentally changed. To investigate further, they placed the bucket over an open fire to see if the ice would melt. Instead of melting, the ice cubes began to glow, almost as if they were on fire. But they weren't burning. It was as though the heat caused the ice to produce some kind of energy. They removed it from the fire, and for months the ice continued to glow, giving off heat. One Basque man took a handful of this ice home, placing it in his wooden stove to heat his hut, a detail that would become significant in Mel's final phone call. They tried to repeat the process, but success was inconsistent. Sometimes it worked, and other times it didn't, leaving them puzzled about the underlying cause of this phenomenon.
Hold on. I'm forming theory.
Yep. I can't wait to hear them.
It's difficult.
It's very difficult.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why it's difficult.
Okay.
I have a theory ready to go.
Okay.
But here's the problem with my theory. Is they did the ice experiment once.
Yep.
And it came up with these strange property cubes.
Very strange properties.
Right. And I could maybe come up with something to explain that. No problem. However, sometimes it doesn't work. But sometimes they're able to reproduce this effect.
Absolutely.
And that's where it destroys all the things I can think of. Because I was thinking, well, maybe there's so many different dimensions out there that they are hitting one that the properties of ice is so different from our ice that it's just mind-boggling. But in order for that to be the case, there'd have to be a lot of possible dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're able to reproduce it, then how? Because that means there's not that many dimensions. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to reproduce it that frequently. That's difficult. I don't even know how that could affect ice like that.
Correct. Now,
did you have a theory?
Oh yeah, I've thought of a whole bunch of theories. None of them stick.
I know, that's the problem.
Here's what doesn't make sense to me. And this is scientific. I'm going to try to dumb this down scientifically as much as I can, because I've always been fascinated by the principles and here's what no one ever thinks about. When water freezes or thaws or turns into a steam, it creates energy.
Right.
You know, and the way I really thought about this was, it was a few weeks ago, just randomly. There was a video that came across my YouTube feed where this guy was creating this, it was like what was that called? I can't remember what he called it. Basically, long and short of it was, he took water and he took salt and he took what's the other ingredient called? It's basically like chlorine is the equivalent.
Right.
And he combined it with something else, and what happens is it drastically reduces the flash point, or not a flash point, but the freeze point of ice. And what happens is it causes it to stay colder longer, even though it's salt. Or should I say salt water? So what happens is you mix all of these things and it becomes almost gelatinous. And what he's doing is he's taking this substance and he's putting it inside of, like, let's use, for example, like a trash bag, and then he condenses it down and he sucks it flat, and he's using it to cool his body down. So if you lay that on the ground, because the temperature difference is different than water, no matter where you go in the world, if you lay it on the ground, it cools down to 65 degrees regardless of where you live. And it stays that way for hours. And the interesting thing about that, when he was explaining, everyone's like, why are you telling us this? When you look at the science of water, and my takeaway from that entire video was how much energy is exerted going from a liquid to a gas, or a liquid to a solid. And if you have a thermal camera on it, when there's that, I call it a flashpoint. It's not called flashpoint. That moment when it turns, like he said it, if you take a bottle of water and you put it inside the freezer for 1 hour on its side, you pull it out, you put it on the table very gently, and you flick it, it instantly turns to ice. And it's because it's
I've seen that.
Yeah, it's literally right on that boundary. You can also uncap the top and pour it out, and the moment that it hits a ice crystal, what causes it to happen is there's one ice crystal that forms that then causes the rest of it to form.
Like a cascading effect kind of thing.
Correct. But if you look at it on a thermal, this part of it is significantly warmer than this part of it. It's because there's a chemical energy reaction that causes it to change.
Okay.
So the fact of that, they drop this ice down into this hole. It comes back up, and not only does it not melt, but they put it in the fire to see how long it takes to melt. It then glows and then takes on a completely different property. It makes me go, that can't be from this world, because our principles will not allow that.
Yeah, and not for that length of time.
And not for that
like
length of time.
You can do certain interesting things to water, like you demonstrated, or not demonstrated, but you told us about, but the time frame is very limited.
Correct.
That can occur.
Correct.
This was months and months. That this happened.
He was throwing it in his fireplace to warm his house.
Right.
I mean,
right.
That's crazy.
But what's really a kick in the groin to me is it's not a reproducible experiment.
Correct.
It works sometimes. It doesn't work sometimes. We don't know the frequency probably that it worked and when it don't, but it should work every time, or it should work no times.
And this was after dropping it 1,500 feet into the hole.
Right. Yeah. I guess it does tell us one thing, though. That there is the realm of possibility that that hole's portal, if we accept there is one, is 1,500 feet or above.
Right.
Or the radiation of the time radiation of the hole is affecting it. But if that were the case, it should happen at almost any point in the hole.
Right.
Right?
Correct. Now,
so that's one thing we can learn from that.
That was probably the biggest thing. That I stopped that there because I'm like, we can't go on to the next thing without discussing this because it's too much.
Right.
We can't add two things to that little segment. We just can't.
No, that would be too much. That was enough.
This next segment, I'm going to give a disclaimer to all the folks out there.
Okay.
If you don't like hearing stories about animals potentially having issues, I'm going to provide a time code right here, right up here. You're going to see it right above my finger of where to go to skip ahead in my video. I'll also put a chapter. If you look down at the bottom, there's going to be your little slider in time. You can click past this moment if you don't want to hear about what happens to animals if they go into the hole, because it could be a little gritty. Some people don't want to hear about animals and what happens with animals and stuff. And I totally get it. Now, if you do want to hear about what happens to animals if they go into the hole, here's the disclaimer that Bert will give. Up to this point, this is the most normal that this episode will be.
You have said this every segment, Bert. Every segment.
I will also say this one crosses into what I would call a show named The X-Files.
So, question before we go to this next segment. What if I don't like what I'm hearing? What do I click on?
Yeah, you don't have a choice. Listen, this is just a job that we have to do.
Dang it.
It's just what you got to do, Nick. Listen,
just kidding. Just kidding.
We have to do this listen, we run a reputable podcast. We got to make sure that we're giving the folks what they got.
Well, let me put my smock and gloves on. Let's get into this.
For anyone that doesn't want to know, this is your final warning. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Some animals.
Art asked Mel why he hadn't lowered a camera into the hole. Mel explained they lacked the funds for such equipment. Instead, they considered sending something live down the hole. One of the Basque men even volunteered, but Mel dissuaded him. Eventually, they decided to send a sheep. As they brought the sheep closer to the hole, it began to panic, like all animals did when near it. Mel deeply regretted what happened next. The Basque men stunned the sheep by hitting it on the head and placed it in a crate. As they lowered the crate, the sheep regained consciousness and began thrashing violently, making a noise Mel described as almost like screaming. However, as the crate descended past the metal collar, the sound abruptly ceased. The crate continued to shake violently as the sheep struggled, but no sound could be heard. At around 700 feet, the sheep stopped moving. When they reached the bottom of the line, a strange vibration traveled up, followed by a sensation of static electricity in the air. They left the crate down there for about half an hour before pulling it back up. From the outside, the crate looked normal, but the sheep was dead. One of the Basque men took the sheep to a nearby table and began dissecting it. The exterior seemed fine, but inside, the sheep appeared as if it had been cooked from within, still warm to the touch. Instead of its internal organs, they found what looked like a giant tumor, filling most of the sheep's body and covered in a strange gel. When they cut into the tumor, they discovered a fetus-like creature attached to it by an umbilical cord. Mel described the creature as resembling a baby seal, about 18 inches long with flippers, but its eyes were very human-like. The creature freed itself from the umbilical cord and gazed intently at the men. One Basque man suggested killing it, but the others disagreed. The creature then moved to the edge of the table. Mel, feeling a strange urge to help it, picked it up and placed it on the floor. Covered in the same gel as the tumor, which smelled like ozone, the creature sat on the floor for nearly 2 hours, observing the men with a compassionate look in its human-like eyes. None of the men felt threatened. Instead, they found its gaze calming. The creature eventually crawled towards the hole. Mel, feeling compelled to assist, picked it up and placed it on the metal collar. It sat there for another hour before slowly crawling back into the hole and disappearing into the darkness. Mel felt immense guilt for what they had done to the sheep. They considered burying it, but ultimately decided to return both the sheep and the tumor to the hole. Mel then shared something personal with Art. Before this trip, he had been diagnosed with cancer and given only months to live. Now, he was cancer-free. He believed that touching the creature had cured him, much like the plants around the holes seemed to have healing properties. Mel told Art he planned to continue his research but vowed never to send another living thing down the hole. Art urged him to gather evidence and take photographs, which Mel promised to discuss with the Basque people. He felt like a visitor there, respecting their authority over the site. Before ending the call, Mel shared one last story. That evening, a Basque elder, who had been visiting the hole since childhood, handed Mel something before retiring for the night. Later, Mel discovered it was a dime with Franklin Roosevelt's image, dated 1943, found near the hole years before in a red envelope.
Dude, I gotta tell you, I have the worst feeling in the pit of my stomach after listening to that. I think I am scared of the possibilities that this has brought up. That whole segment was horrifying.
Yeah.
In my opinion. I know they kept going on about, oh, it seemed so pleasant and it was like nice and it had human eyes. That is horrifying. Like, I don't like this at all. Like, I feel bad. Like, not bad. I feel terror thinking about this.
So for those of you that skipped ahead, you didn't want to hear about the animal part. So that you understand the context of the story. There was a creature that came out of the hole. That's how we'll say it. This creature, they said, was seal-like with flippers, but had human eyes. And it was there for a while. And eventually they felt bad for it and they put it on the collar of the hole. And then after an hour of sitting on that collar, it finally slithered down into the hole. Now,
it just stared at them.
It stared at them, yeah. Now, Mel also said that Mel had been diagnosed with cancer and he only had a few months to live. Now, after he had touched this creature, he was now cancer-free, which was a very interesting.
That part's good.
Yeah, good part of the story. But his theory was, much like whatever that creature was in that from the hole, maybe the reason that those plants are having such an easy time helping people like the people with the HIV and stuff, maybe it's all connected to the same theory that there's some type of healing principle with the hole and anything near the hole.
Creature freaks me out. I'm sorry, I can't stop thinking about that. I'm gonna have nightmares about that tonight.
You know, and again,
like I said, it was presented, oh, it's so friendly and it's compassionate and all this stuff. If I was there, I would have ran.
The best part of this,
I don't say that very often.
Nick was so excited at the beginning of the podcast. We started segment one. He goes, I know this one. Nah, you didn't know this one all the way, Nick.
No, I guess not.
Oh,
if
man.
anything even remotely like that ever happens, I'm gone.
Nick's gone.
That is terrifying. That's one of the most terrifying stories I've ever heard. Something about it. You know what? Most people are going to listen to that and it's going to be no problem. I think it was probably no problem for you. But something about that and the whole description of it gives me a bad feeling.
It's an odd experience, completely odd. It doesn't make any sense. There's no rhyme or reason for it. Scientifically, it makes no sense.
The description of the smells and stuff.
Correct.
Just makes it more believable.
Just makes it believable. There's so much stuff going on with this investigation, is what I'll call it, that it becomes very confusing understanding, is this just elaborately made up with some of the craziest things, or is this legit?
If this guy made up something like that and it didn't happen, he is effed in the head.
That's valid.
Like, that's messed up. I've seen so many horror movies I can't even count. Nothing bothers me like that bothers me.
Oh yeah.
Like this is like the origin of the uncanny valley and why we feel this way. Like way back in time, we must have knew that there were things that had human, like this had human eyes, like they had human characteristics, but they're not humans, and we're instinctually terrified of them.
Right.
This is what I think is bothering me so much.
What I want to do so bad, and I don't know how hard this is going to be, for the thumbnail, because the thumbnail for this is always the same thing. It's just a big hole with a guy standing outside of it looking down. I really want to make, and I don't know how hard this is going to be, a metal collar around a hole with that creature outside of it. And then
I ain't watching that friggin' video. I will never see this.
Man,
horrifying.
I'm so excited.
Horrifying.
I'm so
if you
excited.
can do it, good. But I want to see it.
Oh man.
Don't put it in the Discord. I don't want to see it.
Don't even put it in the Discord. I don't even want to see it.
No, because you do the stuff that I need to post it.
Yeah.
And then you put the picture, which I don't need. I don't need it. Don't show it to me.
Well, you know, YouTube now has a feature. I don't know that I like it. You give it 3 different thumbnails and it presents all 3 to different people. And then they determine which thumbnail people click on the most. And then it turns it into that thumbnail.
Interesting.
The problem I have is ever since I've started doing it, we've gotten less views.
Yeah. Well, one thing of these 2 things will happen. People will see that creature and they'll be like, oh, this is interesting.
What's this have to do with Mel's hole?
And then, yeah, so they'll, that will draw in people. And then there's another set of people who will see that and they'll cancel their internet.
Correct. They probably will. You know, the best part is I always leave the last segment to just kind of close things up. And it's always just let's just tie this thing with a nice little sweet bow. I said tonight, nah.
Right.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to close it out here at the end. But I'm going to leave us with a couple of mysteries in the very beginning.
All right. Are any more creatures coming up?
Well, we have to find out, Nick. I can't just tell you. We got to take a little looky-see.
Unsubscribe. I was having a great time until that last segment. No, I'm not. Just kidding. This is fascinating. It's real scary. And I like that.
That's half the fun, Nick.
After several months of rumors circulating that Mel had died, he made a surprise and ultimately final return to Coast in the same year. Calling from his nephew's place once again, Mel recounted his extensive time spent in Nevada, researching the hole and working with the local tribes. Almost immediately after his last appearance, helicopters began appearing, flying over the area around the second hole. Although, strangely, they hadn't made contact with Mel or anyone else involved. It seemed they were just monitoring the situation. That changed with one particular incident. In the previous call, Mel had mentioned that one of the Basque men had taken some of the glowing ice to heat his cabin. The ice was draining moisture from everything it touched. The man's skin became dry and flaky, and he constantly felt thirsty when in the cabin. He placed a kettle on the stove above the ice, and the steam moved downward toward the ice instead of rising. One day, the man came home to find his wooden stove had fallen through the floor of his cabin and was now embedded in the dirt below. Unable to pull it out, he extended the stovepipe to its new position. 2 weeks later, he returned to find his entire cabin had collapsed into a dusty husk, as the moisture had been completely drawn out of the wood. He abandoned the cabin but returned a month later with his brother, only to discover the stove had sunk about 5 feet into the ground, creating a smooth, almost glass-like hole. When he brought others to see it, they found a team of men already there, using large machinery and cranes to remove the stove and haul it away on a gigantic truck. Since then, Mel hadn't returned to the Nevada hole. His paranoia seemed particularly high during this call, and he believed he was being followed. Unsure if anyone knew the exact location of the second hole, he was wary of leading anyone to it. He had been discussing with the Basque people the possibility of bringing university researchers to investigate, but progress was slow. The Basque people shared that their ancestors had been present in Washington near the original hole, possibly explaining the strange whalebone tree in Ellensburg. They revealed that the seal-like creature had made numerous returns and had begun communicating with them. It could manipulate speakers and radios to speak, warning them that the ice they had taken was extremely dangerous and could potentially destroy the world if not contained properly. The creature also revealed that beings from other realities were watching us, desiring to take over our world because their own reality was too bleak. These beings planned to move into our reality once it was destroyed. Attempts to record these communications only resulted in strange bloops and bleeps, similar to shortwave radio sounds. Despite Art's frustration with Mel for not providing photographs, Mel claimed that taking pictures was futile. Any attempts to photograph the dime resulted in it appearing invisible and standing 15 feet away made it vanish to the naked eye. This phenomenon also seemed to occur with the Nevada hole. The metal collar became invisible when viewed from a distance. Art pressed Mel to get photos of the hole and to work with the Basque people to bring in experts. Mel agreed to try and promised to get back in touch with Art once he had more updates. Mel was never heard from again.
That's wild. So it did trigger a memory of something that you're going to find very interesting. You know how I'm quite interested, and I do like a lot of research into Japanese folklore and yokai, which is monsters, basically, in Japan. I did a little video on one of them one time called Amabie.
Okay.
And what this creature was, is it shows up from time to time. It has the body of a seal. It has human hair and human eyes. It heals people. And it gives warnings about the future. That sounds an awful lot like
it does
that creature.
Does sound an awful lot like it, Nick.
Man, there could be holes all over the place. And I wonder, well, another interesting thing that it said is the ice you've taken. So that definitely means it's not the same ice that they lowered. I mean, that might just be word, like being a stickler for words, but it seems like they've taken ice from another dimension.
There was one word that it kept using over and over again.
What's that?
Your reality.
Oh, yes, your reality.
That would mean...
Man, that's also a horrifying ending.
There's so much to unpack. I'm going to do my best to unpack it all. I've got my little notes here. A big thing that I wanted to cover is we talked about the whalebone that he had at the first hole. The reason it was there was because these people knew about that hole in Washington, and they're more than likely the person that put the whalebone there. So they knew about both holes.
Right.
So kind of tied that pin together. When I first heard about the whalebone, I'm like, that's weird, but I don't really why do I care? Until I got to the end and I go, oh, that part of the story is important because it connects to this part of the story. So I put it in there.
Right.
I'm going to mention this from a game development standpoint. So for those of you that's not game developers or don't play games, have you ever put code into a game and then it just completely screws up?
Oh, yeah. That's like 9/10 of your day.
Yeah. I mean, it happens, right? It's annoying when it happens, but it happens. What if dimensions are like that? Dimensions are supposed to stay closed. We put the ice down, and much like a code issue in a game, maybe it screws the code up, and now basic principles are not the same. So when
I thought of that. I also had wondered if it was making a new hole.
Which, very possible. Very possible. But what I found interesting was when we deal with, we talk about Stranger Things and the upside down. Why do we call it the upside down? Because it's the complete polar opposite of the world that we live in. Much like that ice, when it melts, would give us moisture because it's turning a solid into a liquid. This ice was a source of warmth, and it sucked all the moisture out of a building.
Right.
So it's doing the complete polar opposite, much like coding in a game. If you did one little thing wrong, it flips all the stuff around, and now it's an unplayable game, or it does the opposite of what you expect.
Right. Right.
What if dimensions are the same way?
Frequent.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a game developer, but I know I've worked with many game developers, and they'll be like, hey, what bugs did you run into? And I'd be like, well, I noticed this, this, and this. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's not supposed to do that at all. And I go, yeah. I did that with a few different games when I was a streamer and I was doing the gaming stuff. So that was the first thing that crossed my mind when I thought about that. The fact that the ice, I thought it was funny. They put the ice inside the stove and the stove kept dropping into the earth like what you're talking about and recreating another portal. And then I find it odd that a truck comes and takes it all and they're like, hey, let us go ahead and try to handle whatever this is. Like, where's it going? Where are you taking that to?
I feel like they might know about the threats to our reality somehow.
Very possible.
And they're like sort of doing a cleanup.
Right. Now, another thing I found.
But they might not be the bad guys at all.
I think they are. I think they're the bad guys. Unless you're watching this, you're good guys.
Yeah.
Another thing I found interesting was this creature kept coming out of the hole and finally learned that it could communicate through radios.
Yeah.
Much like ghosts do.
Yeah.
The theory is that ghosts can communicate from a different dimension through the RF field, the radio frequency field.
Yeah. And once again, back to the Montauk Project, radio signals can affect people.
Correct.
As well.
Correct. Now, another thing.
I wonder if that's how they heal the people.
Yes. Another thing that I found fascinating was that all of these objects, the coins, that was what they mentioned, but whenever they tried to take a photo of it, it wasn't there. In fact, if you got within 15 feet of it, it would completely become invisible. Now, most people probably say, well, how do you not notice it becoming invisible? Let me ask you a question. If you put your wallet down on the table and you walk 15 foot away, do you look back to see if it's still there?
Not usually.
Not usually. Now, if someone said, hey, take a picture of your wallet, and you took a picture of it, and then it's not there in your photo, and you go, where the heck? I'm looking right at it. Why is it not in the photo? And then you tell someone,
Right.
and you're 15 feet away, let's say, or a little bit further, and you go, it's over. Where did it go? Did someone take it? And you walk over there and now it's still there. So it's almost like you're leaving. Now, what made me so fascinated about that part is if the dimensions are splitting, who's to say that it's not partially in its dimension and partially in our dimension?
Yeah. Half in, half out.
Half in, half out.
Mm.
Because if that dimension, much like the black light that's coming out of that hole, maybe it's not necessarily making a difference, but it's reflecting our light and how we view our light. So it's not light, it's an energy that's affecting our light, much like a prism or much like, light does bend. What if it's an energy that's causing our light to bend? Much like camouflage.
Maybe it's just what passes for light in the other dimension. I mean, the ice is so foreign to us that we wouldn't recognize it as what it is if we hadn't put ice down the hole.
Correct.
What if what's emanating out is what passes for light in these other realities?
And it very well could.
Which would make them bleak so that these creatures would not want to stay in it.
Correct.
Oh, this is creepy, man.
And then the very last
we got enemies at the gates.
And then the very last thing is Mel was never heard from again. Never.
Yep. Just like everyone else in the story at some point or another.
The question is, what says you at home? What do you think happened? You think this is just a elaborate story that someone made up, or do you think there's some truth to it? What do you think this light is that's coming out of the hole? Do you think that Mel had these healing properties through these plants? Do you believe the seal creature that came from the hole, what do you think that was? Do you think it's extra dimensional like what Nick and I have came up with? Or is there something you've thought of that hasn't even crossed our mind? That's where all the questions.
I really don't know who you're talking to. Because everyone shut off their computer as soon as the seal creature came along.
Valid. That is valid. Aren't you glad you didn't listen to the whole Art Bell thing now?
Oh, yeah. It's way better that I could react to this online.
Oh, man.
But if somehow you did survive that, please like, subscribe, torment your friends by showing them this episode.
That's how
really
we continue
traumatize
to grow.
them.
We need them traumatized.
That's right. Traumatizing people.
For sure. Well, this has been an absolute banger. I definitely appreciate y'all being here.
Heck yeah.
Until I see you on the next podcast. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.